My name is Helena, and the moment my daughter called me a burden, something inside me broke, and something else was born. It happened on Thanksgiving weekend in the house where she had grown up, in the kitchen where I had cooked her first birthday cake. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air. Pies cooled on the counter. Candles flickered against polished wood. I had worked since dawn, humming to myself as I set the table, believing family could still mean warmth. But warmth did not come. As I carried a tray of glasses into the hallway, I heard Lily's voice from the living room. She was speaking to her fiancé, Daniel. Her words were sharp, impatient, dripping with disdain. "She is such a burden," Lily said. "Always clinging, always asking. I can't keep carrying her forever." The glasses trembled in my hands. Daniel's reply was calm, calculated. "Then stop letting her. Once we're married, it's our house to run. She doesn't have anything. No money, no future. She will have to accept what we decide." I froze. Their laughter followed, easy and cruel. I wanted to step in to remind Lily of the nights I stayed awake sewing dresses when money was short, of the extra shifts I worked so she could go to college, of the meals I skipped so she never would. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I walked quietly back into the kitchen, set down the tray, and sat at the edge of the table. The dining room erupted with chatter soon after. Lily smiled at me as if nothing had been said, praised the food, toasted to family. Daniel's arm curled possessively around her shoulders. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Their plates emptied, their glasses clinked, and I sat at the head of the table feeling smaller than I ever had in my own home. That night, after the last dish was scrubbed and silence filled the house, I opened the cabinet in the study where Samuel, my late husband, had kept our most important papers. My hands shook as I pulled out folders worn by time but strong as ever. I laid them across the table. Account statements, investment summaries, the deed to the house. Every page bore my name. Not Lily's. Not Daniel's. Mine. For years I had let my daughter believe I was weak. That I had nothing left but memories and the mercy of her approval. I thought it might make her stronger if she believed she carried me. I thought love would shield us. But love cannot survive contempt. As the clock struck midnight, I whispered into the empty room. "She thinks I am a burden. She has no idea what I hold." The papers glowed under the lamplight like silent witnesses. The balances in those accounts were enough to crush her assumptions. The deed itself was proof I was not a guest here. This house, this life, these walls, they belonged to me. And in that moment, grief hardened into something colder, sharper. I folded the papers back into the folder and locked them away. Tomorrow I would smile, tomorrow I would keep the mask. But inside I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer waiting for my daughter's kindness. I was preparing for her betrayal. Because if Lily believed she could erase me, she was about to discover what it meant to underestimate the woman who had built the foundation she stood on. The morning after Thanksgiving was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and coffee, but the house felt different, as if something inside it had shifted. I folded napkins back into their drawer, polished the silver until it gleamed, and tried to push my daughter's words from my mind. Burden. The echo would not fade. I told myself I was imagining it. That she had spoken in frustration, not cruelty. That Daniel had simply agreed to keep peace. But truth has a way of showing its face when you least expect it. I was carrying a basket of laundry down the hall when I heard them again. Lily and Daniel were in the living room, voices low but not low enough. I paused near the staircase, out of sight, my hand resting on the banister. "She can't stay here forever," Daniel said. His voice was firm, like someone laying out business terms. "We have plans. After the wedding, this house needs to be ours. She'll only hold us back." Lily's sigh was heavy, tired, as though she were speaking of a stranger, not her mother. "I know, but she has nowhere to go. She'll cling. She always does. We'll have to make it uncomfortable. Little by little." A silence followed, then Daniel's voice again, colder this time. "She doesn't have anything of her own. She'll fold once she realizes she has no choice." The laundry basket slipped against my hip. I gripped it tighter to keep it from falling. My breath came shallow, my heart pounding. They believed I had nothing. They believed my survival depended on their approval. That my name meant nothing, my past meant nothing, my sacrifices were dust. I stood there for a long moment, fighting the urge to confront them. But I didn't. Confrontation would give them warning. And I needed their confidence, their arrogance, their certainty that I was powerless. It would make them sloppy. Later that day, as they went out to meet friends, I returned to the study. I pulled the folders from the locked drawer, spread them across the desk once more, and forced myself to study them with clear eyes. The deed, the accounts, the balances. Every line told the truth. This house, this money, this foundation, they were mine. Samuel had trusted me to guard them, not to hand them away. I tucked the originals into a safe deposit box at the bank that afternoon. The clerk stamped the receipt and slid it across the counter. All secure, she said. I slipped it into my purse with trembling fingers. That metal drawer, heavy and final, felt like armor. At home I left behind only copies. Enough to look real. Enough to tempt anyone who might search. And they did. That evening, I watched from the hallway shadows as Daniel rifled through the study cabinet. His movements were quick, practiced, his face sharp with purpose. When he pulled a folder free and tucked it under his arm, I felt a strange calm wash over me. He believed he had found something. He believed I was careless. Let him. When Lily joined him later, their voices carried faintly through the walls. She's hiding more, Daniel muttered. We'll find it. Once the wedding is done, it will all be ours. My daughter's answer was softer but colder. She won't fight. She never fights. I closed my eyes, gripping the doorframe until my knuckles ached. They were wrong. For years I had chosen silence, patience, sacrifice. But silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. That night I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, notebook open. I began to write everything I had heard. Dates. Times. Exact words. A timeline that would grow with each passing day. I looked at the neat lines on the page and whispered to myself, "You think I won't fight? You are about to learn who I really am." Because I now understood their betrayal wasn't just careless words. It was a plan. A plan to erase me from my own home. And plans once uncovered can be dismantled piece by piece. The first rule I learned was simple. Words fade but records remain. If I wanted to protect myself, I needed more than memory. I needed proof. So I began building it. Quietly. Carefully. Without a single hint to Lily or Daniel. I started with the house. Early one morning while they still slept upstairs, I pulled the deed from the safe deposit box and spread it across the kitchen table. My name was etched in clean legal ink. Owner Helena Whitmore. Not Lily. Not Daniel. Mine. I photographed every page, scanned it at the library, and stored copies on a small flash drive I kept hidden in a tin under the pantry shelf. Next came the bank accounts. Samuel had left behind not just savings but investments, stocks that had grown over the years, quietly compounding while Lily assumed I had nothing. I requested updated statements, each stamped by the bank, each bearing my name, balances that would silence any doubt. I placed them in a binder marked accounts and locked it away with the deed. Still, I knew documents alone would not be enough. Daniel was clever, and Lily was eager to believe his version of events. If they accused me of forging or exaggerating, I needed witnesses. People outside the family who had seen the truth with their own eyes. I visited Mr. Rivers, the notary who had signed the deed transfer after Samuel passed. His office smelled of paper and ink, the same as it had years ago. When I asked for a certified copy of the log, he pulled it without hesitation. "You and your husband came together," he said, pointing to the record. "The property was placed entirely in your name. I remember it." His voice was steady, unquestionable. I thanked him, clutching the copy as though it were armor. Then I spoke with Mrs. Patel, our longtime neighbor. Over tea at her kitchen table, I shared only part of the truth. I told her Daniel and Lily were pressing me to leave the house. She frowned deeply. "I heard them talking in the driveway 2 nights ago," she said. "Something about making you move out once they married. It didn't sound kind." She wrote a short statement in her careful handwriting and signed it. Another piece of proof, small but strong. Back at home, I installed a discreet audio recorder in the living room. Perfectly legal in my own house, and I told myself I would never use it unless I had to. But within 2 days the device caught what I had feared. Daniel's voice. "We'll wait until after the wedding." Once we're in control, she won't be able to stop us. Lily's voice. She won't fight. She never does. Hearing my own daughter dismiss me so casually nearly broke me, but I pressed save. I transcribed every word, printed it, slid the paper into the binder marked voices. Each evening while they watched television or scrolled on their phones, I sat quietly in the study, expanding my timeline. Dates, words, actions, evidence. Each line a thread that would one day weave into a net too strong for them to escape. I also documented the little things, unpaid groceries that I covered, repairs in the house Daniel claimed credit for but never touched, bills addressed solely to me. I photographed receipts, highlighted names, attached them to the timeline. Small pieces of paper, but together they painted a truth larger than any story Lily and Daniel could invent. One afternoon while Lily was out shopping for wedding decor, I checked the study desk again. Daniel had left a legal pad out, its surface covered in his tight scrawl. At the top he had written, "Plan after wedding." Beneath a list. "Move her to smaller room, call broker, list house quietly, control accounts." I photographed each page, replaced the pad exactly where I found it, and filed the images under intent. The evidence grew until it filled 2 thick binders. When I stacked them side by side, I felt something I had not felt in weeks. Strength. They wanted me invisible, but each page proved otherwise. Yet fear still lingered. Fear that if I showed my hand too early they would twist it. Fear that a judge might side with them if I looked unprepared. Evelyn, an attorney recommended by Grace, reminded me of something critical. Timing, Helena. You don't strike with pieces. You strike when the picture is whole. So I kept gathering. Patient. Silent. Watching Lily and Daniel laugh in the living room. Kiss in the doorway, whisper late at night. They believed I was blind. But every glance, every careless word, every scribbled note only sharpened my vision. And then came the envelope. One cold morning I found it on the doorstep. No return address. Inside was a printed notice of a meeting with a real estate broker. The appointment was scheduled in my name. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine. But I had never signed it. My daughter and her fiancé weren't just planning to erase me. They were forging my name to make it happen. The forged signature burned in my hands. The neat, practiced loops mimicked mine so closely that for a moment I doubted myself. But I knew the truth. I had never met with a broker, never scheduled any appointment, never signed away my own home. This was no longer whispered cruelty. This was war. I couldn't fight it alone. My binders of evidence were strong. But evidence without allies is just paper gathering dust. I needed people who would help me wield it with precision. People who could stand beside me when Lily and Daniel tried to turn the story against me. The first person I turned to was Grace, my oldest friend. We had met decades earlier at work, 2 young women trying to survive in an office that ate ambition like candy. Life had scattered us in different directions, but Grace had always been steady as an oak. When I called her, my voice trembling, she didn't hesitate. "Come over," she said. "Bring everything." That night I sat in her living room, binders spread across her coffee table. She turned each page carefully, her glasses sliding down her nose. When she reached the audio transcripts, her lips tightened. "Helena," she said, her voice low but fierce. "This is not just hurtful. This is calculated theft. They're preparing to strip you of everything." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. But what do I do?" "You get a lawyer," she answered. "And not just any lawyer. Someone who knows how to expose liars for what they are." Grace gave me a name. Evelyn Ross. A woman with a reputation for cutting through arrogance like glass through silk. She had handled high-stakes estate battles before, cases where family turned against family and greed disguised itself as entitlement. The next morning I called Evelyn's office. Her assistant's tone was brisk but kind. "Bring every document you have," she said. "She'll want to see it all." Evelyn's office was modest, tucked above a row of shops downtown. There were no gleaming marble floors, no polished brass plaques, just shelves lined with thick law books and a desk covered in neatly stacked files. Evelyn herself was sharp-eyed, her gray hair pulled back into a knot, her presence commanding without a single wasted word. I laid my binders before her, explaining everything from Lily's cruel words to the forged broker letter. She listened without interrupting, only asking for clarification when dates or signatures blurred together. When I finished, she sat back, folding her hands. "You've done more work than most clients who walk through my door," she said. "You haven't just gathered evidence, you've built a case. Now we need to give it teeth." My breath caught. "Can we stop them?" Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "Not just stop them. We can turn their own arrogance into a weapon. They're counting on you being silent, on you being too weak to resist. That belief will make them careless. And when they're careless, we strike." Grace leaned forward. "What's the first step?" "Two things," Evelyn said. "First, we secure every account and asset under court protection so no unauthorized transfers can occur. Second, we prepare to expose their intent publicly. People like Daniel survive in the shadows of respectability. Drag them into the light, and they crumble." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Exposure. That was what I wanted. Not just legal victory, but truth, undeniable and visible. Evelyn instructed me to open a new bank box and move the originals there under her firm's oversight. She promised to file for a restraining order on the accounts, making every forged attempt useless. "And," she added, tapping the forged letter with one long finger, "we submit this as evidence of fraud. A forged signature is not just immoral. It is criminal." That evening, I felt lighter carrying the binders back to my car. The burden was no longer mine alone. Grace had given me courage. Evelyn had given me direction. At home, Lily noticed nothing. She breezed through the door with shopping bags, humming as she showed Daniel fabric samples for the wedding. They kissed in the doorway, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. I set the kettle on the stove and smiled politely, hiding the strength beneath my calm exterior. Later, I placed the audio recorder in a new location. The dining room, where Lily and Daniel often whispered after dinner. The house itself was now my witness, capturing every word they tried to hide. And the house didn't have to wait long. That very night, as I pretended to read in the study, their voices carried through the recorder. "She won't fight," Daniel said. "Once the broker papers go through, we'll handle the rest." Lily's laugh was soft, chilling. "She still thinks love means safety. She has no idea what's coming." I pressed stop, saved the file, and slipped it into the binder. My hands no longer shook. Because what they didn't know was that every word, every plan, every cruel whisper was no longer secret. They thought they were writing my ending. In truth, they were building the case for their own destruction. The suspicion that my daughter and her fiancé's betrayal might run deeper than forged papers gnawed at me like acid. But Evelyn reminded me of something vital. Rage without structure is chaos. And I didn't want chaos. I wanted precision. So we began building the counterplan. Evelyn cleared her desk and spread my binders across it like puzzle pieces. Each receipt, each transcript, each photograph became part of a larger picture. "You've already built the skeleton," she said, her voice steady. "Now we'll give it muscle. Lily cannot claim accident. Daniel cannot claim ignorance. Together they will face exposure." Grace leaned in, her eyes bright. "Where do we strike first?" "Here." Evelyn tapped the forged broker letter. "Forgery carries weight in court. It shifts the narrative from family quarrel to deliberate crime. Judges cannot ignore fraud. Once we file, we request an injunction preventing any sale or transfer of the house. That freezes their plan before it breathes." "And the accounts?" I asked. "We file for protective custody of assets under your name. Every attempted withdrawal becomes evidence of bad faith. The moment Daniel tries again, it is no longer suspicion, it is violation." I exhaled slowly, feeling resolve harden in my chest. "And what about humiliation?" Evelyn smiled faintly, like a general who has already studied the battlefield. "You said you want them to feel what you felt. Not quietly, but in the same arena where they mocked you. We can time the filing so that news breaks at their most public moment. They will walk into their own downfall." The idea struck me like fire. Exposure. That was what Thanksgiving had been for me. Public shame, stripped of dignity in my own house. I wanted them to taste the same, only sharper, undeniable. For the next week, we worked in silence and steel. Evelyn drafted motions while Grace helped me catalog every document into chronological order. I printed extra copies, each in labeled folders. One set stayed with Evelyn. One went into a locked box at the bank. One I kept at home, hidden in a place only I knew. We met at night in Grace's living room, spreading papers across her rug, drawing lines between dates and actions. "Here," Grace said one evening, pointing at Daniel's legal pad notes. "See how he planned the sale right after the wedding? That shows intent." He wasn't reacting, he was plotting. We added it to the timeline. Meanwhile, I played the part they expected of me. At home I smiled faintly, served tea, nodded when Lily rambled about flower arrangements. She thought my silence meant surrender. Daniel smirked as if victory already belonged to him. But inside I was rehearsing. Every polite word, every soft smile was another stone in the wall that would contain them when the truth came crashing down. Then came the question of witnesses. Evelyn wanted more than just documents. She wanted human voices. So we contacted Mrs. Patel again, this time formalizing her testimony. She described hearing Lily and Daniel discuss making me uncomfortable, until I left. Her words were careful, her tone sorrowful. Evelyn typed every sentence into an affidavit and slid it into the binder. Mr. Rivers, the notary, agreed to appear in court if necessary. "I remember that day clearly," he said. "Your husband insisted everything remain in your name. He wanted you secure." His steady voice would be harder to dismiss than any piece of paper. And then there was the recording. Evelyn listened with narrowed eyes as Daniel's voice filled the room. "Once the broker papers go through, we'll handle the rest." Lily's laugh followed, sharp and dismissive. Evelyn pressed stop. "This alone will shake them. But paired with documents, it will bury them." Night after night, we sharpened the plan. The forged letter would trigger legal filings. The recordings would confirm intent. The witnesses would give credibility. And the timing, we would choose a moment when Lily and Daniel believed they were most untouchable. At home I watched them grow bolder. They whispered less carefully, certain I was blind. They left shopping bags for their wedding scattered across the living room, filled with items purchased on credit they assumed I would cover. Daniel bragged about our house to friends who visited, never glancing my way. I smiled, poured coffee, nodded. Inside my pulse was steady. One evening, as we packed up papers at Evelyn's office, she looked at me directly. "Helena, this is not just about saving your house. It's about reclaiming your name. Do you understand?" I thought of Thanksgiving, of sitting at the table while my daughter smiled at me with a mouth that had already dismissed me. I thought of being called a burden, invisible in the home I had built. And I nodded. Yes, this is about reminding them who I am. Because just as the counterplan reached perfection, Lily announced something that shifted the battlefield entirely. She and Daniel wanted to host an engagement celebration at the house. In my house. And they wanted it to be grand. The announcement came on a Wednesday evening. Lily stood in the doorway of the study, her smile wide, her voice syrupy. "Mom, Daniel and I decided to host our engagement party here. It's perfect, the space, the atmosphere. Everyone we care about will be here." She said our house again. I caught the word like a thorn in my ear. I pressed my hands flat against the desk to steady myself. "When?" I asked. 2 weeks, Daniel answered, appearing behind her, smug in his tailored suit. "Caterers already lined up. Invitations go out tomorrow. It'll be the event of the season." I forced a smile. "Lovely." They walked away laughing, oblivious to the storm that churned inside me. First, I thought this was a gift. The perfect stage. Guests, cameras, attention. All the elements Evelyn had insisted we would need for exposure. The same way they had humiliated me at Thanksgiving, I would return the gesture, only sharper. But as the day drew closer, complications surfaced. The caterer called me, confused. "Mrs. Whitmore, just confirming the payment method. The card on file is under your name." Of course it was. Daniel had put it there deliberately, expecting I wouldn't notice until the bill arrived. 200 guests. A feast worth tens of thousands. My money used for their celebration. I clenched my jaw. "Leave it as is for now," I told the caterer. "But send me the full invoice in advance." The next complication came in the form of a phone call from Evelyn. "Helena, the judge set the first hearing date, 3 days after the engagement party. If we file the forged letter before then, it goes public immediately. That could overshadow the event completely. But if we wait, we risk giving them space to move faster. The choice weighed on me. Immediate exposure or perfect timing? Grace, ever the voice of balance, reminded me. Revenge is sweetest when they don't see it coming. Let them believe the night belongs to them. That arrogance will make the fall harder. I agreed, but nerves coiled in my stomach. The night before the event, I overheard Lily upstairs. I can't wait to show everyone the house. It's practically ours already. Once the broker finishes, Mom will sign, and we'll finally be free of her. Daniel's laugh followed. She doesn't even know what's coming. But they were wrong. I knew exactly what was coming. Still, the pivot struck me on the morning of the event. Evelyn called again, her tone sharper than usual. We received a counterclaim. Daniel filed documents claiming you were mentally unfit to manage the estate. He's arguing you've been careless with finances and need guardianship. The words hit me like ice water. Guardianship. To paint me not just as weak but as incapable. To brand me as a woman who couldn't be trusted with her own name. Can they do that? I whispered. They can try, Evelyn said. But they'll need evidence. Do not give them any sign of panic tonight. Let them believe you are calm, collected. We'll dismantle the claim in court. For now, this party becomes more important than ever. How you hold yourself in front of their guests will matter. I hung up the phone with shaking hands. They weren't just planning to take the house. They were planning to strip away my dignity in law. The hours blurred as caterers filled the kitchen, musicians set up in the parlor, and flowers spilled across the tables. The house, my house, transformed into a glittering stage for their celebration. Guests began to arrive, stepping across the threshold in furs and tailored coats, offering congratulations to Lily and Daniel. I moved quietly among them, a hostess in name only. No one noticed my clenched hands, the fire beneath my calm smile. From the corner I watched my daughter preen in her ivory gown, Daniel at her side, their laughter echoing off walls Samuel and I had once painted together. They raised glasses, toasted to a future that erased me entirely. But they didn't know what Evelyn and I had prepared. The forged letter, the recordings, the witnesses, all waiting, ready to be unleashed at the perfect moment. And as the evening grew louder, as champagne flowed and laughter filled the rooms, I felt the pivot sharpen into clarity. Tonight would decide everything. If I faltered, their version of the truth might take hold. If I stood firm, their empire of arrogance would collapse. Because just as Daniel lifted his glass for the grand toast, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Evelyn. Her message was only 5 words. It's time. Release the files. The ballroom pulsed with laughter, glasses clinking against crystal. The chandeliers glowed above, painting everything gold. Lily and Daniel stood at the center of it all, hosts of a celebration built on stolen ground. Guests circled them like planets around a sun, smiling, congratulating, raising glasses. And me? I stood at the edge, silent, holding Evelyn's message in my hand. It's time. Release the files. My fingers tightened around my phone. Weeks of silence, months of patience, every note in my binders. They had all been building to this moment. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. Daniel raised his glass. To family, to love, and to a future built together. His smile was dazzling, his voice strong. Guests erupted in applause. Lily leaned into him, radiant, believing her world was perfect. I slid my phone into my purse, opened the drive Evelyn had prepared, and pressed send. A single email addressed to the guest list, the local paper, and most importantly the bank and court officials. Attached were files. The forged broker letter, the notary records, the account statements, and transcripts of Daniel's own words. Within seconds, phones began to buzz around the room. Pockets lit up. Heads bent toward screens. Murmurs spread like cracks in glass. The first voice broke the spell. Daniel, is this your signature? A man near the front waved his phone, his voice sharp. Because it looks forged. Lily blinked, confused. What? Another guest whispered loudly. It says here he tried to sell the house behind her back. His own fiancé's mother. The room rippled with shock. Chairs scraped against the floor. Guests turned, eyes wide, scrolling through attachments, seeing headlines forming before the ink had dried. Daniel's face paled. He tried to laugh, his voice brittle. Ridiculous. Obviously fabricated. Someone's trying to ruin this night. But Evelyn had timed everything perfectly. As Daniel sputtered, a second wave hit. Reporters' alerts flashing across phones. Local outlets had already published the first stories. Forgery allegations rock engagement of Hale and Whitmore. Photos of the forged documents, quotes from Mrs. Patel and Mr. Rivers, even snippets of the recordings Evelyn had cleared for release. Daniel's words echoed from a speaker somewhere in the crowd. Once the broker papers go through, we'll handle the rest. His own voice betrayed him louder than any denial. Lily's eyes widened in horror. She turned to him. What did you do? He grabbed her wrist. It's nothing, just lies. But the crowd was no longer with him. Investors backed away. Friends shook their heads. Even Eleanor, his mother, looked at him with dawning shame. I stepped forward then, calm and steady, my voice carrying in the sudden hush. These are not lies. These are your plans. Your signatures. Your words. You thought I was powerless. You thought I was a burden. But tonight everyone sees the truth. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Daniel opened his mouth but no sound came. Lily's face crumpled, torn between rage and disbelief. The guests stared. Their admiration curdled into disgust. Evelyn appeared at my side, her presence sharp as steel. She handed me a folder, and I placed it on the table nearest the center of the room. If anyone doubts, she said coolly, the originals are here. Verified, stamped, irrefutable. No one spoke. No one needed to. The weight of the evidence was crushing enough. Daniel's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Champagne splashed across his polished shoes, the fizz loud in the silence. I looked at my daughter then. You called me a burden, I said softly, my voice carrying to every corner. But tonight you see who carried whom. Her lips trembled. She turned away, unable to meet my eyes. The party was over. The music stilled, the chatter died, and the house that was mine, stood as witness to the truth. Because while Daniel crumbled before everyone, I knew the night's fallout had only begun. By morning, lawyers' headlines and consequences would come crashing down, and nothing would ever be the same. The moment the evidence spread across the room, the air shifted. It was as if the chandeliers dimmed, the music stuttered, and every guest suddenly realized they were standing in the middle of a scandal. Murmurs rose like waves crashing against rocks. People leaned across the table, phones glowing in their hands, their voices sharpening with disbelief. Forgery? At his own fiancé's mother's expense? Did you hear the recording? That's his voice. She paid for the whole house and he tried to erase her? Daniel stood frozen, pale, gripping the back of a chair as though it were the only thing keeping him upright. His confidence was gone, replaced by frantic darting eyes searching for an escape. Lily's hands shook. She clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Daniel, she whispered, but the microphones of a dozen phones caught it. Tell me this isn't true. Daniel swallowed hard, sweat glistening on his temple. It's misunderstood. She's twisting everything. He jabbed a finger toward me. She's manipulating you all. But Evelyn stepped forward, her voice calm and slicing through the noise. Manipulation does not carry court seals, notarized documents, and timestamps. The proof is here. The law already holds copies. What you are seeing is not speculation, it is fact. Gasps spread across the room. The walls themselves seemed to close in. Guests who had toasted only minutes earlier now pulled back, their polite smiles replaced with tight frowns. One investor I recognized from Daniel's circle shook his head, his face red with anger. I put money into your projects. If you'll forge signatures to steal from your own family, what's to stop you from forging contracts with me? He threw his napkin onto the table and stormed out, several others following. Phones began buzzing louder. Alerts, news updates, social media posts spreading like wildfire. Within minutes, hashtags lit up online. Daniel's name trended with words like fraud, liar, and forgery scandal. The string quartet, unsure of what to do, set down their instruments. The music died completely. And then Eleanor, Daniel's own mother, rose from her seat. Her pearls rattled against her collarbone, her voice trembling with fury. You've shamed us, she hissed. In front of everyone. Your father and I built a reputation, and you've burned it to ashes in one night. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Mother, She raised her hand sharply. Do not speak. Not another word. Lily turned to me then, her eyes glossy, her face pale. "Mom," she said, voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you show me before?" The question pierced me, but I held her gaze. "Because I believed love would be enough. Because I hoped you would choose me over greed. But you didn't. You listened to him." Her mouth opened, but no words came. She collapsed into her chair, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. Daniel, desperate now, tried to push through the crowd. "Enough of this. This is all a setup." But two guests, men he had once called friends, stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "No, Daniel," one said coldly. "You're not walking away from this. We've seen enough." The tension snapped when a reporter's voice rang out from the back of the room. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have anything to say?" All eyes turned to me. Cameras lifted. Phones aimed. I stepped forward, my hands steady, my voice calm. "Yes. I have something to say. For years I was called a burden. I was pushed aside in my own home, treated as though I had nothing. Tonight you see the truth. I am not powerless. And no one, family or not, has the right to steal what is mine." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with realization. And then slowly guests began to nod. Whispers of agreement rippled through the crowd. Daniel sank into a chair, his head in his hands. His empire of charm, arrogance, and lies had collapsed in real time before 200 witnesses. The party was over. But the consequences had only just begun. Because when I returned home that night, exhausted but unshaken, a knock rattled my door. Through the peephole I saw Daniel, disheveled, desperate, standing in the cold, begging for me to let him in. The night ended not with applause or music, but with silence and shattered glass. Guests left quickly, murmuring as they disappeared into the cold. By the time the last car pulled out of the driveway, only echoes remained. My house, the house they had tried to steal, was mine again, standing tall as witness to their downfall. But the fallout did not wait. It arrived with the morning sun. When I awoke, my phone buzzed endlessly. Headlines flashed across every news site. Engagement celebration turns to scandal. Forgery exposed in front of 200 guests. Photos from the party plastered the screens. Daniel's pale face, Lily's tears, my calm stance at the center. On social media, the story spread like fire. Videos captured by guests had already gone viral. In one clip, Daniel's voice rang out. "Once the broker papers go through, we'll handle the rest." Millions watched, thousands commented. Words like disgrace, betrayal, and justice flooded the feeds. The calls began soon after. Journalists wanted statements. Lawyers reached out with offers. Even strangers sent messages of support. "Thank you for standing strong. Your story gave me courage. You showed the world that silence is not weakness." But the most unexpected moment came when Daniel himself showed up at my door. It was still early, frost clinging to the windows when I heard the knock. I peered through the peephole and saw him, disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. He looked nothing like the man who had stood at the center of that glittering room. He looked like a boy caught in a lie too big to bury. "Helena, please," he said when I opened the door a crack. His voice trembled. "Let me explain. I made mistakes. I let ambition get ahead of me. But we can fix this. I just need you to understand." I studied him, silent. The same man who had laughed about forcing me into a smaller room. The same man who had coached my daughter to call me a burden. The same man who had forged my name. "You wanted me erased," I said finally, my voice calm but sharp. "And now you want my forgiveness?" His shoulders sagged. "Yes. Just give me another chance. I'll make it right. I'll step back if you just don't press charges. Please." Behind him cameras flashed. Reporters had followed, hungry for more. His desperate plea was no longer private, it was public. And I understood then that humiliation was complete. Not only had his empire crumbled in front of friends, but now the world would watch him beg at the very door he had once tried to push me out of. "I don't need to do anything," I told him, keeping my voice even. "The law will handle you. I don't need revenge anymore. The truth is enough." I closed the door gently, leaving him on the step as reporters swarmed. Inside, I sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over me. Grace arrived soon after with coffee and newspapers. Evelyn called to confirm the court date, her voice steady with confidence. "The evidence is ironclad," she said. "He has no ground left to stand on." Lily did not call. Not that morning, not that afternoon. I imagined her hiding, torn between shame and anger, caught in the wreckage of the man she had chosen to believe. By evening, I stepped outside to breathe the cold air. The neighborhood was quiet, but I felt a new kind of weight. Not fear, not grief, but clarity. The story was no longer just mine. It belonged to every person who had ever been silenced, pushed aside, called a burden. And yet, I knew there was one more chapter to write. Court would come. The judge would speak. And when that gavel fell, it would not just close their schemes. It would open the door to something new for me. Because as I folded the paper and set it aside, Evelyn's voice echoed in my memory. "Justice is near. But when the gavel strikes, you must decide. Will you forgive your daughter, or let her drown beside him?" The courthouse smelled of wood polish and cold air. Reporters lined the steps outside, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward as Grace and I walked in together. Evelyn moved with her usual calm, a fortress in a dark suit. I clutched my binder to my chest, not because I doubted her but because those pages were my truth, and I wanted them close when judgment came. Inside the courtroom, Daniel looked smaller than I remembered. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked. The confidence that once filled his voice had drained, leaving only hollow echoes. Lily sat beside him, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. The judge entered, gavel striking once. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. Evelyn presented our case with precision, each piece of evidence laid out like a blade. The deed, the bank statements, the notarized logs, the forged broker letter, the recordings of Daniel's own words, all lined up in undeniable sequence. Witnesses spoke calmly, affirming what I had already lived. Mrs. Patel described overhearing their cruel plans. Mr. Rivers verified the deed transfer. Each voice wove another thread into the net. Daniel's lawyer tried to object, to spin stories of misunderstanding and confusion. But the forged letter silenced the room. The handwriting matched his own notes, the signature an obvious attempt at mine. And when Evelyn played the recording, Daniel's voice filled the courtroom. "Once the broker papers go through, we'll handle the rest." His shoulders slumped. His lawyer's words faltered. The judge leaned forward, his gaze stern. "Forgery, conspiracy, fraud. These are not family disagreements. These are deliberate acts of deception." He lifted the gavel, his voice firm. "The property remains in Helena Whitmore's name. All attempts to transfer are void. Further, restitution may be sought for damages." The gavel fell. Final. Irrevocable. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Lily turned to me then, her lips trembling. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I once carried on my hip, eyes wide with fear, reaching for safety. "Mom," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "I'm sorry." My chest ached, but I did not answer. Forgiveness is not given in a courtroom. Forgiveness is earned in the years that follow. Outside, the cameras waited. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Whitmore, how do you feel? What will you do next?" I stood tall, the winter sun bright on my face. "I feel free," I said. "For too long I was called a burden. But today the truth spoke louder. I am not powerless. No one is powerless when they hold on to their dignity and their proof." The cameras flashed. Grace squeezed my arm. Evelyn nodded in quiet triumph. That night, I returned to my house. My house. I walked through its quiet rooms, the silence no longer heavy but peaceful. The walls held memories, yes, but now they held strength as well. Samuel's picture smiled at me from the mantel and I whispered, "It's done. We won." I poured a glass of wine and sat by the fire, not in grief but in resolve. Tomorrow I would begin again. Without their shadows, without their lies. Just me, my name, and the life I had reclaimed. And to anyone listening, anyone who has ever been silenced, dismissed, called a burden, hear me, your strength is not gone. Your silence is not weakness. Proof and patience can turn betrayal into justice. If my story touched you, share it. Let others know that no one should suffer humiliation in silence. And if you want more stories of betrayal turned into empowerment, subscribe, because this is not the end. This is just one of many voices rising,